There's a lot of debate these days about the best way to balance the markets. There's those of us on the pure libertarian side saying things like tariffs, things like government subsidies, things like interference in what the free market value of an asset is a bad thing. And, life would be better if we just let the free market dictate what the value of an asset is. Unfortunately, there are people on the other side of it that see that with protectionism and maintaining certain markets and capabilities within spaces, um, there's benefit to that. Now, whether tariffs are being used in that way or not is a matter for debate. But the one thing we can always appreciate is we don't have to worry about those things when it comes to GMs because it's a free market and assets are going to move, whether it's for the price you want to pay for them or somebody's paying up or somebody's paying down. Anything is available if the price is right. And if there's anything we learned from our emergency podcast last week, that is absolutely possible, especially if you have to pay up for it. So we'll talk about some of those trades later on. But one of the things that was really appreciated, I felt like, by the chat on Saturday was a bit of a deep dive on the Saint. I think it was the Saints. Or maybe that was Sunday. I don't know. Time has lost all meaning for me. But point is, we'll kind of continue on with that path. We'll talk about Saints and the other 15 teams in the NFC tonight. We've got the AFC then next week. I figure we'll do season sort of predictions that last week, and then boom, we are smack dab into draft season. So I've got RJ on with me. I think we got the Commanders joining us a little bit later, and maybe a few other guests talking through it. And we're just going to go through the NFC, and we're going to talk about where we see things going, surprises, hot takes, and just kind of anything that pops to mind. And usually, by the time we get through all 16 teams, we've gone through an hour, and we're barely hitting the trade. So should be fun for those listening that want to jump in, by all means. And RJ, thanks for being here.
Yeah, always a pleasure.
Yeah. So, like I said, we usually start with the AFC and work our way down. I want to start with the NFC this time because I like to flip things up. So we'll start from the NFC West and work our way up from the league page. So again, NFC West, we've got the Niners, we've got the Cardinals, we've got the Rams, we've got the Seahawks. Seahawks pretty well ran away with this division last year. Cardinals was in full-on rebuild mode. Niners and Rams had, I'll say, ambitions of the playoffs at some point during the year, which fell flat, but are both commonly teams that are in that sort of purgatory of, you squint and you see a wild card contender, but you squint the other direction and say, oh, God, if they traded three pieces away, they'd be in the running for the top 10. So, I don't know. Is it much different this year, or do you see, somebody catching Seahawks? And if not, are these other three competing for the wild card?
Rams has made significant improvements on his team. His defense is a little bit shallow, but I definitely think that he can compete with Seahawks at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I had to be a little bit of a straight man there, but yes, agree. I think Rams with two quarterbacks, that's going to help him. He's got a very strong running game. Obviously, some holes to fill in other places, but still has a few pieces left to do that. Seahawks is just Chiefs on the NFC. Obviously, having to pay up in a couple of places for a couple of big contracts to balance things out. Otherwise, everyone is a 7-digit contract, somewhere between 80 to 180 points on the year. Great way to be successful during the year. Great way to make a deep run in the playoffs. And again, the big pay-ups are for guys like Derrick Henry or, Nick Chubb and his potential bounce back. Kyle Pitts. But then you also have the big just soakers of cap like Cleveland Farrell that could be included in some kind of trade. So I know he's trying to make some more moves to round out his depth, which is pretty substantial to begin with. But definitely one of those teams that if he hits a bad day and Rams hits right, easy for a Rams team to overcome a team like this. Let's talk about the Cardinals. Very invested in the rebuild. Has Caleb from last year. Had the one-on-one until trade this weekend with me. But has Caleb, has Jalen Wright, has Jaleel McLaughlin as pieces. George Pickens is number one receiver right now with Vele and Darius Davis and a few others as good depth and then some dart throws. Sam Laporta at tight end, very solid and still quite young. Defense is starting to show signs of life. Calais Campbell actually landing someplace is a big win for him. And then Nakobe Dean on defense with a pretty solid linebacker core so far. He's really just got to focus on the front four to complement the back seven. And I think the deal he made with me is going to help him do that. So now it's just a matter of kind of filling out some of these spots. And, he's, I think, got the fourth place schedule in the West. So he may benefit from a little bit of that and actually push for the wild card with this team.
Yeah. So when you look at it, he's on par with Seahawks and Rams when you just look at defenses. Like they both have some points at defensive end, then a whole bunch of filler. They have some points at linebacker, then a whole bunch of filler. They both have all three of them have decent secondaries. And they both at least have somebody as a defensive tackle. So that's good. Where they outpace him is on offense, which hopefully some of the picks that he got from you earlier this week will help add to that offense, but we can't count those just yet. So that's why I don't have Cardinals in the conversation yet, but I don't think it's unreasonable to think that he could be in the conversation by week 1.
Yeah, I mean, that's the truth of it. He has, I think, now 10, 13, and 16 this year, and then 2 firsts next year. So you can take those 2 firsts, get, if you want, probably one more pick in the first round this year, get an offensive player at 10, double dip with 2 elite defensive talents at 13 and 16, and then come right back in with another shot with that 4th first or something like it. Or again, take 2 of those firsts and go get somebody. I mean, people have been putting veterans who are very reliable on the trade block recently. That might be the route to go. I mean, that's some of the stuff I'm doing right now is trying to target those kind of guys to fill out the roster. So he's definitely got pieces still to trade. And because of having powerhouses like Seahawks and like Rams in his division, his pick has still got some allure because it's probably right on the playoff fence. So kind of that mid-teens range with upside and downside is something that you'll still see plenty of teams pay up for with probably a pick valuation in that range this year for that pick next year.
Yep, I agree.
San Francisco's just in that tough spot that they tend to be in every year, but somehow do enough with sort of a unexpected signing or draft pick or otherwise that completely breaks out and saves them. But this year might just be the year to embrace it just for a year, move out of some of these pieces, race to the bottom, get your use your picks that you have for next year and do a quick reload. I'm not saying he has to move a guy like Nico or Hutch or people like that, but if he was going to, now might be the time to go do that, um, and load up. But I think he's got to wait till a little bit closer to the draft to see kind of what's going to be in some of those positions before he makes one of those moves.
I agree. I agree with all these statements. I don't want to. I don't want to push for tanking because I have an offer out to 49ers right now, and that would be in bad taste. But I do agree. He is a couple of steps behind the rest of the division, so probably just better to retool and reload at this point. If you're gonna be a mediocre team, there's nothing wrong with just completely taking a step back.
Yeah, and look, I mean, I've come after a lot of the pieces that you're probably trading for or offering for. So, this obviously could be seen as me trying to give advice that's in my favor, but I call it how I see it. I think Kirk Cousins has lost his job, and barring a really fortunate sequence of events for him, he's not going to be a starter this year. Now, the running rumor right now is, as somebody who follows Cleveland sports, he was spotted at two different Cleveland restaurants a couple of weekends ago that were within range of the clinic that the Browns use to do medicals on their players. So, in advance of a potential draft day trade, he was in Cleveland and potentially having medical work done. So, who knows? Maybe this is a sign that Cousins is going to be the front man for the Browns as they bring along a younger quarterback behind him, just like he's doing in Atlanta. But I think that's best case scenario for him. Mixon had a great year last year, sort of profiting on Mixon's current value, Nico's incredibly high value, and reloading. Like I said, just makes a lot of sense to me. But again, that's my opinion on it, and I'll shut up and let him run his team the way he wants to run it.
So what you're telling me is Kirk Cousins is getting traded for the second pick because it's the Browns.
No, it's not going to be for the second pick. We know that. But no, it's like, again, if it's a 6th-round pick or something like that for Cousins in the draft, because they end up going, Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter at 2, trying to trade back in for Dart, and then they can't get in front of the Steelers. So, Sanders goes to New Orleans, Dart goes to Pittsburgh, and they've got to take a guy like Slough from Louisville, and they want to add Cousins as a little bit more of a hedge because I think that the player is going to take a little bit longer. That is the scenario I can see happening.
Yeah, you're good. I just made the joke because I like to overpay for quarterbacks.
I know, but I also like to try and show work where I can. So
yeah.
So you see this division, I think, like I do. It's Seahawks is the point team with Rams in a close and competitive second, rising Cardinals, and a fading 49ers. Probably I'd expect to see 1.5 to 2 teams in the playoffs from this division. I think the great thing about the NFC so far, and this is with all of the shade at the AFC, is there's nobody in full tank mode for the NFC right now. Not a team. Every single team in the NFC is still pursuing winning this season. So whether that's, hey, the AFC is a step ahead in thinking about these things, you can make that argument. But, right now, nobody has given up on the year on the NFC, and that's something to be admired.
Yep. I appreciate it. The competition.
Yep. So yeah, I didn't want to skip over Rams, but like mentioned, Geno and Matt Stafford. Three deep at running back, Brees, McCaffrey, and Tyrone Tracy. Jalen McMillan and Ayuk as his cuts at receiver, and Travis Kelce at tight end. Lucky he had a benefactor that gave him half of an offense mate, but that's the fun of me. Again, it's really that defense that needs to be built out. The points he have are vets who he's had to pay up for in terms of contracts. But at this point, he doesn't have a lot of picks to continue to build out with. So I think this might just be his team through the draft. And then once he gets access to his 2027 picks, he has what he needs to kind of complete the puzzle.
So I'd imagine he's been a pretty popular trade target. So I don't feel bad pointing him out. But do you think breaking down Tyrone Tracy is a smart move?
I do, only because I don't know what happens in New York. I think the front office and coaching staff are coaching for their jobs. Dable is a offensive mind. So if he gets fired, it's a question of they go defense, and then a new offensive coordinator comes in, and then is there a different preference at running back? Singletary is still signed there. Clearly, he seemed to take a backseat last year to Tracy, but is there, again, a work share that happens again this year? And then, like I said, if the coaching staff gets replaced, is there a different direction they go next year? So
right.
I like the idea of breaking him down. I think you could probably get in the 108 to 110 range for him right now. And again, a pick around that range or an asset around that range is probably going to be more productive than otherwise. I think going to someone like the Commanders, who desperately need a lead running back and are having Nick Bosa on their block right now, and making a deal, you'd probably have to include a couple of your big contracts to make it work, and that might require him shuffling some of those off to a third team. But again, doing something in the structure of a Tracy for Bosa makes a lot of sense for me.
Yep. Yeah, I can agree. I mean, we're getting into the weeds with it, but I would view Bosa slightly less. So like that's probably the better, like one of the better targets. Like you can ask for Bosa and maybe a smaller offensive piece, or something of that kind of a deal. That sounds like a smart move to make.
Yep. So every year, I feel like there's one division in our league that I would like to refer to as the Hold My Beer division. Because every time that somebody makes a move, somebody else in the division says, hold my beer, and tries to one-up it and up the arms race. Last year was the AFC North, where it seemed like right after Bengals made a big ad, the Ravens would go get somebody, and the Browns would go get somebody, and the Steelers would keep up with a big deal for Trevor Lawrence. And then you'd see, and this kind of happened throughout the offseason, where we just kept seeing a migration of studs moving to the AFC North. And this year, that's starting to feel like the NFC East, where you've got Cowboys who are breaking down some of their bigger pieces for a collection of, I'd say, picks and broader, younger depth to build around to make themselves more of a competitive roster, even with some of the big expensive pieces they have on their team. You're in the process of pivoting from a couple of the big pieces to picks back to other younger pieces you want to build your team around after winning the division last year. Giants continues to go big game hunting, adding Parsons, adding Myles Garrett to give him probably the most star-studded defensive end room right now in the league. to go with a young and rising offense. And then what the Commanders have been doing in terms of parlaying some late firsts and that defensive end room they had into a much more well-rounded and deep team continues to step up. So again, every time it feels like, the Giants make a big move to match Commanders, or the Cowboys break down something to keep up to kind of reposition themselves. Then the Commanders go and get DK Metcalf from the Raiders, and then the Giants try and break something else down. So it's fun, it's exciting, and it's entertaining. And God, it's going to be a pain in the ass to play you guys this year.
Yeah, if everybody else in the division could stop, that'd be fantastic.
No,
but I agree. It's been an arms race through and through.
One of my late night sitting around assessing teams, I realized that I'm probably not going to win the arms race as far as like marquee players in the league, but I can definitely be the goose of this division. So I definitely think it's going to be competitive. I don't know who's going to win it though.
Right. And I mean, that's the great thing about our league is there's many different ways to try and compete in the division. And look, Giants and for the most part, I'd say Commanders are trying to do it primarily with studs and duds. Commanders have a little bit more depth based off of some of their draft picks the last couple of years. But, a lot of his points are going to come from his studs, just like a majority of Giants' points are going to come from his studs. And if it's not those players, you're probably not going to get a whole lot of depth. Again, I'd say the Commanders' receiving core, because of his rookies from last year, are an exception. But it's kind of, where the points are coming from that team versus, again, a Seahawks build, a Chiefs build, kind of the things like you're talking about of, let me get 25 guys on my team that can score in double digits in any given week. And that's going to be what carries me forward. And then you have Cowboys, and I think they're in the process of pivoting, bless them. It's just, unfortunately, with some of those pieces, he may have held a little bit too late. But again, I think that's a conversation. Maybe we start with Cowboys, get into the details. You have Hurts, and bless him, last year, he was one of like the big three that if you were going into a startup draft, in a lot of cases, you wanted either Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, or Jalen Hurts as kind of one of the big three quarterbacks as a cornerstone if you really wanted to go that direction around one. Again, who you talked to made that look a little bit different. Obviously, Allen, I think, had the best of those seasons last year as Mahomes took a bit more of a step back in terms of his points. Hurts gets a lot of his points in rushing and rushing touchdowns. But there's definitely the passing options there for him to, carry the day with his arm too. So I know Cowboys has tried to break him down, and he's a tough piece to break down, just like any elite quarterback is tough to break down in this league. Giants saw a lot of trouble with it with Josh Allen last year. I've had trouble with it when I had Allen and other of these big quarterbacks to try and move them. The market's not as big as people think, and the values you get offered aren't what you'd expect for it, especially once you start paying these guys big money. Running back, again, Monty should be back in time from his leg injury, and then Mostert landing in Vegas is interesting. I'm not sure what that's going to end up being. That's either going to be a guy who scores 150 points for you this year, or he doesn't make the roster at a preseason. So that's a fun range of values on a player. Adams, with his landing spot in LA, pretty much as good as it could get. He's got a couple of, let's say, good depth pieces like Trey Tucker and Darius Slayton and others. No real tight end to speak of. And then the defense is gotten younger and more distributed rather than what it was basically circled around Micah Parsons before. I hogged all the oxygen on this one. Sorry, guys. Anything else you want to share about your league mate, your division mate here?
No, in talking with him and talking trades, he's looking to essentially ship the older guys. He knows where he's not to say he knows where he stands, but he knows where he stands in the division with the arms race that's going on. So he's looking to move Devontae, his younger pieces, his young upcomers. He's not really looking to move, and if he is, you're going to be paying probably more than what market is for them, for good reason, because there's no reason for him to move off those guys. But I would expect fully for him to move off of Devontae. I would not be shocked for him to move off of Montgomery, just to get back value and build for the future.
Yeah, I think it's the challenge. I think he has shown patience in doing some of this. I think he got a really good deal for Parsons when he moved him. So now it's kind of a matter of finding the right deal for these other players as he does pivot. Because Adams is a really tough case. And look, I offered after him and I offered late first value for him. And if you go based off his production, that is offensively low. Based off the contract and age at 32 when receivers start to break down, less offensively low. But again, he's in a system with McVay that is very receiver friendly, with a quarterback who's been very, helpful to players like Devontae Adams. So you have a complementary set of headwinds and tailwinds at the same time. So tough to find a position. So he's probably going to end up making a deal, I'd bet, in that sort of low 20s, high teens range with him, where it acknowledges some aspect of his age, but also leans heavily into what his production capability is this year. But it's going to probably take him a little bit of time and a lot of creativity to get there.
I would fully expect he'll probably be moved post-draft once you have a team that's looking to compete, doesn't quite get the receiver or receivers that they want from the draft. Nothing fell to them, and they're looking to bolster that position group. I would fully expect him to move it probably post-draft or very shortly after.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think the one counterpoint I'd make is post-draft, it's really hard to find contract space and roster space because everyone has just decided to load up on 250 new players across our, I think it's 1,280 roster spots, even after people have filled a lot of those roster spots with roster cloggers from free agency. So coming out of those, you have a lot of teams at 40 players. Now, is there someone usually on that team that they have a pretty good idea of, I can get rid of this guy and put a Devontae Adams there? Yes, but people are putting inflated values on those at post-draft. So, again, we'll see. Because then also the other aspect is, so what's that team getting? Hey, I didn't get my receiver, and I've used all my picks, and now I'm trading you my 27 first and second for a guy like Adams. And, hey, that could be, that valuation that we're talking about, or maybe a little bit even better, but you're not seeing it for 2 years. So, who knows? All right, let's move over to Giants, and then we'll talk about you guys. Again, this is the quintessential studs and duds. It's May, it's Barkley, it's his receiving core, Bateman, Neighbors, Odunze, Reed, Tucker Kraft and Kate Otten at tight end. And then, like I said, a pretty elite set of DNs, solid tackles, and a back seven that needs a little bit more work. He had to sacrifice some in that area to really build out some of the other positions that we talked about here. But I'd say he's got a real concern about tight end, about linebacker, and about his back four.
Yeah, I'd agree. His linebacker's injury away from disaster.
I will agree. Nick Bolton's a good linebacker, but he's one of the, I don't know, what should I say, more inconsistent of the premium linebackers. So definitely would look to just change the player. Somebody else in the same scoring range, just somebody that's a little bit more consistent. And then secondary needs help. The safeties aren't bad, but they're not, they're 9 to 11 point a game safeties.
Yeah, and I think he goes through cycles where he realizes he needs to break apart a player, and I think he's in the process of trying to take a player, break him all apart, and get big juice without giving up a lot at the position. And it usually takes a little bit of time for him to work his way into a range that a lot of us can deal with. So I feel like he's started that process. So in a few weeks, probably just before the draft, he'll be ready to make some of those moves. But what I've seen so far, he's doing the old. And again, I forget who put this on their trade bait last year, or maybe it was the year before, that they were trying to move pieces for other pieces that got them younger, cheaper, and scoring more points. Like, cool. So you want to trade the piece you have now for a piece that's worth more and give up nothing in the process. Like, hey, that's an admirable goal. Yeah, that's an admirable goal in any trade that you're going into, and more power to you. But yeah, usually you don't get all three. But anyways, the Giants have again consolidated into a nice collection of very strong players. Not a full roster's worth, so some maneuvering is still needed to get the rest of the way there. All right, let's talk about RJ first, and then we'll finish up with the Commanders. Again, have pivoted a lot of the, I'd say, high profile players on the team. The Kylers, the Saquons, the Addisons, the Kelseys, the guys that were the big sticker items on the team have transitioned. That said, the offseason has been quite kind to Stephon Diggs and Cooper Kupp. So despite, again, just I'd say basic attrition, RJ is still sitting there with a nice collection of picks. I think he's got 4 first-rounders still. 2 of them in the top 10 or top 7 even, and still has the starting pieces of an offense between Javonte in Dallas and J.K. Dobbins still having his job, I think, in L.A., being a couple deep at receiver, and then no starters at tight end, but a nice collection of stuff, and then those picks, he's in a position to just kind of get deep real fast. But again, if it's a question of does he break down those picks to get deeper, or does he, take a couple of stud rookies with depth pieces? I think that's only time will tell. Unless RJ wants to tell us right now.
No, I think that's a great assessment. I mean, I do have the picks, so as of now, unless anything changes, I'll make those picks, and I will very much be a team that will be dependent on if my picks hit or not. But I like the things that I have right now. None of it's real prominent players, but it's a good collection of role players, depth. My defense is pretty good. I do think that it's not great, lacking some of the big point getters, but I do think that I have a quality defense already. So that needs a little bit less attention than my offense. But yeah, I'm still building. It's rough to assess it when I do. Like you said, I have 4 picks, so we don't really know where my team's going to land just yet.
Yeah, I'd agree. Your defense does look good. You got a lot of depth too. I think the offensive pieces, there's some question marks. Obviously, with Kupp in the new role, Diggs coming off the injury with the Patriots, because Patriots and wide receivers are never a good combo. It's a lot of like you said, do the picks hit, and do the new locations for the players hit as well.
Yep. And also with J.K. Dobbins, if I'm not mistaken, he's still a restricted free agent right now.
I think that's right. So realistically, they'll probably end up just re-signing him, or he'll sign the tender in LA, and they'll give it one more year with him. But again, I wouldn't be shocked to see Harbaugh, as he is wont to do, use a day 2 or day 3 pick on, say, Donovan Edwards, and put him next to Dobbins and kind of bring them along as a running back by committee, as he likes to employ.
Did the Chargers also sign Najee?
Yeah, Najee Harris. Yeah,
Okay.
only for like $5 million a year, so it's not a huge contract. It's a single year contract. So again, I think it's going to be probably draft picks being invested there, and them likely going with the hot hand.
Right. And the last that I heard, going back to JK specifically, is the Chargers do want him back, but they're waiting for compensatory picks to lock in for next year. And I guess that's around draft time, and then I guess they will try to look back into adding him.
I think we lost Mike. Yeah, we did.
Oh, okay. I was wondering why it got quiet.
Yeah, no, he disconnected. Probably be back in a minute here.
Yeah, I would imagine so. Oh no, podcast is in shambles. Who haven't we done? You?
Yeah, yours truly.
Okay. Well, I'll start looking at that. I'll pick it apart.
Sure.
Good option at quarterback. Young, cheap, productive. Running back is a major concern. Although Jerome Ford is a bright spot in there. There's potential that they bring somebody else in because they're not sure about Chubb, but Ford plays a different role, so I do like that. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, sorry about that, guys. The joys of hotel internet is sometimes it just decides to completely disconnect on you. So, yeah, I like the hotel I'm in because I have a grocery store right across the street that I can use in my little kitchenette here and make myself dinner when I'm on the road, which is nice. But at the same time, the Wi-Fi sucks. So, no place is ever perfect. But
is it free at least?
What's that?
Is the Wi-Fi free at least?
Let's just say I spend enough time in hotels that I don't really have to worry about that.
There you
go. But anyways, apologies. Did you guys start talking Commanders team or?
Yeah, I was talking about his running backs. Just got off that. Wide receivers. You have 2 in the top 15, and then DK and Marvin Mims. And if Tyler Lockett ever decides to find a place to work, yeah, it's really good. I actually think you have too many assets at wide receiver, and you should convince somebody to buy Jalen Polk from you for a reasonable price.
I've gotten offers within the division for Jalen, but out of spite, I've kept him.
Oh, I mean, I definitely think you should. It's not for me, so and
No, it's not.
I don't care where he goes, but yeah, I would definitely get rid of him if you can get reasonable enough value. Tight end, I still think you need to address tight end. Hooper's fine, Likely's fine, but I think you need somebody that's in there in a full time capacity.
Or one more part timer.
Right. Defensive tackles, all right. A little thin, but fine. For the first time in I don't know how many years, you need depth at defensive end. You need one more guy that's going to get some snaps, at least. Linebacker, if you can get some upgrades, but you're 4 deep on like productive guys, so that's decent enough. I'd worry about the down weeks where you have 3 starting linebackers, but all of them put up like 8 points. Like you probably want some guys that are going to consistently do better than that. And I think this is a theme of the league, but secondary is lacking.
Yeah, and I think there's been a lot of, I'd say, money spent in free agency on corner this year. And I think it looks like 2 of the 3 starters that you have are people you signed off of free agency this year. And then Dane Jackson, again, was a free agent ad last year. So free agency has been good for you. And, these are some decent sized names that were signed in free agency. So it's not like, oh, he's a nickel corner or a 4th or a 5th, corner that's only going to see a handful of snaps. Like, for the most part, these are starters who, for some reason or another, usually injury, just didn't produce last year. So I don't feel too bad about your corner situation. I think it's just, like RJ said, the front 7 needs a little bit of help, and then running back and tight end. So you have a multitude of depth at receiver to parlay out of. But as those of us who know and have been overweight in certain positions before, they never come asking for the 3rd or 4th guy or the 5th guy at a reasonable price. They're coming after the top ones. And if they can't get the top ones, they're sending you 60 cents on the dollar for your 6th guy. And it's like, well, my 6th guy would be your 2nd guy, so pay up. But that tends to take a while to get to happen.
Yeah. The plan is to, obviously, as you can see from my trade bait, is to downgrade, one of the 2 defensive ends. Honestly, I couldn't care which one it is, but one of them. And then likely swap one of those receivers for a running back somewhere. And probably use those 2 picks. I think I've got a late 1st and a mid 2nd for some depth pieces, likely on defense.
Yeah, we were talking pre-pod. We think that 127 is going to be a nice place to get like DE 4 or 5 in the 1st round or something like that, or probably like a top 3 linebacker would still be available. You'll be starting to get to that range where it's probably the back end of the running backs or receivers, or some of the quarterbacks you feel a little bit less good about, but still have some very strong, attractive defensive starters on the board.
Yeah. That's the plan, is to use those. I shipped off my earlier 1sts, not much earlier, but earlier nonetheless, for those, the wide receiver group that I now have after going full on rookie last year, and obviously turning that into more of a productive group, shall we say, for this year. And hopefully none of them get shot in the leg in the preseason. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's usually how it happens. That's what I expect to happen for me this year. I'm going to draft a whole bunch of like mediocre guys and actually have to go buy productive players next year. And
Yeah.
it happens.
Yeah, for me, I end up hitting on players when I don't expect to, or we, that early third or late second. It's not my first rounders.
I do think your Jaden Daniels trade, as much as it was probably heartbreaking for you to move him,
It hurt. Still hurts.
it definitely catapulted you out of that like on the fence playoff team.
Mhm.
If that makes sense. Like you're definitely like a playoff team, probably regardless of who your division mates are.
Yeah, I was trying to essentially, get more away from the studs and duds that I've done for a number of years now. Start parsing things out into multiple productive players instead of the number one QB asset in the league, which on my team wasn't helping anybody. He dragged me to the playoffs. Him and King Henry, they absolutely dragged my team to the playoffs last year, only to obviously lose in the first round when I believe both of them were on a bye. But
yeah, I mean, there's multiple ways to enjoy this league and be successful, and sometimes you realize that like taking the 12-team league approach and only picking from players from like that type of player pool doesn't always get you there. So a few years into the league, you understand depth and understand rotations in the NFL, and you can go a little bit deeper with your roster development.
Yeah.
All right. So if we had to rank this division, I mean, it's annoying to do, especially with him on the pod, but I feel like Commanders is putting himself in the pole position right now with Giants slotting in at second, again, with both still having a lot to do to fill out the full rosters, but I'd say Commanders having a little bit more readily movable pieces to go do it with. RJ, I'll put you third at the moment because you still are a bit incomplete in terms of it. And Cowboys feels like he's going to break things down, but not necessarily tank because he can't. And a lot of the pieces you'd want to get to tank have been consolidated already. But it feels like he's going to try and be in that above the Chargers range where, hey, let me get a bunch of good young pieces. I'm not going to have picks because those have consolidated already, but I am going to have a lot of pieces that are going to grow me into a nice team going forward. But he's probably slotted in fourth right now. And then I'd say 2.5 is my number of playoff teams from the East.
I'd say heavily dependent on how many of RJ's guys hit. It's definitely possible to have 3.
Mm-hmm.
Again, if you have a QB or Diggs goes off or Cup even, I can definitely see him sneak into the playoffs with the big divide there is between the teams that have and the teams that have not.
Yep. Yeah. I think this division is, though maybe the teams are a tier higher as far as quality, it is similar to the NFC West in the sense that you have 2 teams that are far and away, as of right now, the better teams of the division. You have a third that is kind of in the middle that has enough assets to get up to the other ones. There is a world where I just draft 4 guys that put up 89 points and I'm worse than mediocre, but we'll see. And then there is another team that is likely taking a step back and, either rebuilding or retooling over the course of the next year.
Yeah. I think that's fair, but I think some of the quality of some of those higher rated teams are a little bit more clearly defined. But anyways, we'll move to the South, which has been traditionally a killing field. Look, I mean, Bucks is still set up as the favorite in this division, despite the fact that Panthers, I think, won the division last year, and Bucks actually missed the playoffs, uh, robbing them of a potential three-peat. But there's a reason the Falcons have 2 titles and the Bucks have 2 titles, and the Panthers made the Super Bowl last year. This is no aspect of this is an easy division. The closest thing I'd say we have to a tanker in the NFC is the Saints, but if you look at that roster, he's got a lot of good young pieces and a lot of I'd say if you're looking at a tier in a position, particularly a quarterback, and you're looking for who's the last player in that tier, but is still going to provide you production at that tier of performance, Saints has all of those players. So it's something I like to do is look for, okay, who's going to be the player in that tier that I feel can still provide me a certain level of production, but I can get it as cheap as possible. Saints has that. It's like, okay, who's the aging vet who probably has one more good year and what's the cheapest you can get that? Probably Keenan Allen. Oh, look, he's got it. What's the guy that you don't feel fantastic about? It's a bit of a coin flip, but could still get 180? Adam Thielen. Yep. And those are the pieces that he's trying to move. He's still got a lot of good pieces otherwise. So I know it's I'd say 3 or 4 horse race for who has the best receiving core in our league. But at least the deepest receiving core right now has got to be Saints. But after it gets rightly consolidated to sort of fit the rest of his team in there, he'll drop out of that list in that consideration, I'd say. All right, so we talked about the Saints a good bit on Sunday. As mentioned, I think the guess from those of us who have picks is that he's probably going to go award it to, assuming he's there, giving him his quarterback. He's going to have to redistribute some of his receivers for other offensive pieces and fill out his team. But again, he is still in the process of figuring out who the rest of his tent poles are on this team. Panthers, again, still also feels like a bit of a work in process. Went very cheap at quarterback with Tua. And then outside of him has a lot of, I'll call second or third year guys who are rising with their complementary aging veterans. So Trey Benson with James Conner, obviously. He's got Zay Flowers and Xavier Worthy at receivers. He's got a pretty ambitious defense still and is continuing to make moves. So he's definitely moved away a lot of the value and depth he had at his position to get even younger. And I know he's still trying to, I think, move pieces to get back in the top 10 to get himself Jackson Dart in the draft. But, you know, it's the Panthers. He's always an active trader. He's always an active person sending offers to try and get to where he wants to get to. So I have no doubt that this team still has quite a few more moves to make before we start into the draft.
Yeah, it's definitely a good team, probably a playoff team. There's nothing that I can really point at and say he needs to improve. He needs some of his guys to get better opportunities, but that's about it. He needs some depth at wide receiver.
He's that wide receiver. He's talk about heroes and zeros. It's heroes and nothings. But
yeah, he's going to likely be one of the better teams in the league.
Yeah, and I think the same thing at linebacker. Just lacking depth there. But he's got plenty of pieces to move or downgrade to add depth elsewhere. So I think it's just like Mike said, a matter of when he makes those trades, because he is always active with those trades. I'm sure he will make them. It's just what will it turn into?
No, Panthers is really high on Cooper. I'm pretty sure he just assumes that he's going to score like 700 points this year.
He's gonna need to because he's the only linebacker he has.
I don't need multiple linebackers. I have one that scores enough for 3.
Sounds pretty good to me. Shifting over to Falcons. Again, before the Jaden trade, and I feel like even now, he's really focused on a second-year player as well. Blake Corum, Ray Davis, Jaden Daniels. He had Ladd as one of his tent poles there as well. Ben Sinnott with Zach Ertz. A lot of give me guys 2 or 3 years into the league and let me build around those seem to be the Falcons' MO and mantra. But again, a lot of the pieces that had to move to get him Jaden means he's got a little bit less to deal with. So it seems like he's really been trying to pivot back without, jeopardizing any of the cornerstone pieces. But that's going to be tough to do with what's left. Not that it's not compelling, but again, it's really hard to maintain points, age, and cheapness. And a lot of the pieces that would have to potentially move to get him a good young piece at some of these positions are either very strong in the cheap, the good, or the young aspect of things.
Yeah, I just think that Daniels trade really got rid of like most of the quality value that he should have held on to. Like, he should have just had Nix and Ladd. Oh, okay. So, I mean, he at least needs to improve at running back. Does he have any picks left?
He has
Third.
4 3s and a 5th this year, and then a 2nd and a 4th next year.
Oh. Can we choose to break down Jaden Daniels?
That's almost what I was thinking. If Jaden has a healthy year and another very productive year, I don't think it would be crazy to say he could get just as much, if not maybe even more than what I got. Because the biggest worry from everybody that contacted me about Jaden was, oh, well, he's an injury risk. He's, thin frame, blah, 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 blah. I think if he has another solid year, I don't think it's out of left field to think that he could get just as much, if not maybe a smidge more value.
Potentially. I mean, like, our value is always associated with contracts, so there's less of a, like, he has 3 years left and he's already put up 387. Like, there's not a point in time where he's going to be any more proven with any more years added to that affordable contract. Like, this is peak value. But I also said that when the trade happened, like, he just paid peak price for Jaden Daniels. So he can probably get comparable back next year. But right now, like, he might have to be content with being second or third best team in this division.
Yeah. I mean, when I traded Jaden, that was not planned. He wasn't on my trade block. It was just a comment that I had made in chat that had, gave him the idea to start sending offers. I believe Mike was the other person that sent offers, maybe another 1 or 2. But he was never truly on the block. I wasn't fielding offers. I didn't fish around for anything. It's just what transpired. So you might find another person in the pool of 31 people that has that much interest.
But for right now, like, this year, he has a window to do something. I mean, I don't know. I wouldn't necessarily call him a championship team, but He has a lot of like older things that are going to be productive this year, but I don't know what's going to happen after that.
Mhm.
So he's definitely in a win now mode.
Yeah, I'd almost argue that he also has some pieces that after this year could become exponentially more valuable, depending on what happens with Blake Corum. Obviously, this year with what's happened with Kyron Williams. Same thing with Ray Davis. James Cook, is asking for $15 million a year. I'm a Bills fan. I highly doubt the Bills pay him that if that's truly what he's asking. So that opens up that role next year for that lead back opportunity. And I mean, Ray Davis, in the limited time that he had on the field last year, he did look good. So I'd argue that next year might even give him more of an opportunity than this. Just some assets. Same thing with Ben Sinnott. What Ertz just signed for one more year, I believe.
Yep.
So again, he leaves after this year, it opens up this huge role in that offense with a premier QB. Yeah, I think next year he's got a lot of up and comers that could have a huge value increase.
Yeah. Then the last team in the division, the Bucks. I admire the Bucks for taking a very Vikings, Pats, when Bill is active, Broncos like approach to trading. He is not getting super fixated on I have to win every single trade. He is allowing pieces to move. Now, again, I know from an offering and a negotiation perspective, he's sure as hell starting on that I have to win every trade side, but he's working his way to a middle point that is allowing him to move things at a expeditious pace. Look, I think there's been some deals that he's done really well on, and some that I question whether he got back the value that he gave up. But he's made enough trades recently that pretty well balances out. And now it's just a matter of how does he continue to fill in the holes. Goff, obviously, and Hooker backing him up, and Allen behind him. He's got the Detroit quarterback room. He's got the starters in Seattle with Charbonnet and Walker, Amon-Ra, Cortland, Debo, a good 1-2-3 at receiver, although I don't know if Debo's ever going to be the receiver he's been in the past. Chig was a nice grab for cheap. Sanders he got from me for relatively cheap. I think he's got a good tight end by committee. Derek Brown is again another from me that he got in the extended on a relatively cheap contract for defensive tackle if he comes back strong the way he should. D end is a bit of a hole, but especially after trading Trey Hendrickson, big hope there is that Wanham bounces back in good form, and then kind of the rest of the defense still needs to be addressed, but it definitely feels like he's shuffling pieces around to get younger, but he's not getting the scoring he's had in the past. So Bucks to me is feeling a lot more vulnerable than I have felt about his team in the past.
Oh yeah, it's definitely a tier below teams he's had in the past. Although having that stack of Jared Goff and Amon-Ra, that's pretty decent.
Yeah. Again, I think if I'm handicapping the division, you've probably got one team coming from the South this year.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe 1.5. I think Bucks and Falcons are probably your leading candidates, and then Bucks and Panthers are leading candidates, then Falcons and Saints being a couple of moves away, but especially Saints having the assets to go do it. So, look, Falcons, we don't love the trade he just made, but he still has a number of pieces on that team that score points. And there's a lot of unsettled situations that the South is currently dealing with. So I'll go ahead and handicap and say one team makes it, and I think it's probably the Panthers.
Yep, I agree.
All right, and that leaves us with the NFC North. Packers continues to stand strong. His one trade being Andy Dalton that he picked up in free agency for a 5th-round pick. So good work, Jeremy. Keep up the good effort. Bears has started breaking down some of his picks both this year and next year into some players, which should help him win a few more games than he's normally used to. Building things out in a good way. Lions still needs to probably get off the bench a little bit for some of his deals. But again, major tent poles in guys like his receivers, like Josh Allen, a lot of good young defensive ends that he's invested in over the years that still have some time to break out in roles that are expanded with a lot of vets in front of them moving out of the way. And then, of course, there's me. And, everyone likes to joke that, well, we don't know where Mike's going to be. 3 weeks ago, I had not a lot of picks, but a really strong-looking, vet-driven contender. And now I am 25 picks deep and still have a couple of pieces left to build around, but some pretty high picks to help me accomplish some of those things. So despite what people like to joke, I do have a plan and an approach I'm taking to this that does not see me fully tank this year. But I'm, as usual, being fluid in how it exactly gets implemented because leaves me a little bit freer to make moves, which is one of the things I really enjoy doing in this league, as known. But also not be too tied up if a couple of things don't work out.
Yeah, obviously the future of your team depends heavily on those picks, but I was just impressed that you were able to gather all the picks that you did while still keeping that quarterback on your roster. So kudos for that.
And yeah, I think that's kind of one of the things I want to build around. There's a couple of people that I've wanted to add that are good, and I overuse the word tent poles, but starting level players at the position that I now don't have to draft. Like I've got a number of early picks, and I don't have to use one of those on a quarterback. I can, but I don't have to. Again, with the Chicago backfield as it stands right now, granted, there's every possibility they're going to add to it. I don't have to take a running back if I don't want to. If I like the receivers better, I can do that. But I might want to. So now it's just a matter of continuing to consolidate because just I can't make all these picks, obviously, without having to cut some of the players after I've picked them. But nonetheless, I think there's still a lot of effort going around to try and consolidate and acquire some picks. So I might find a captive audience here to move some of these things around. But yeah, outside of kind of the big points, Kyler, the picks, and then a couple of other, I'd say, pieces that I really like. The point of my team is the picks right now. Lions, we talked about a little bit. You got Josh Allen, you've got Puka Nacua, you've got Drake London, Chris Olave, a good young triumvirate of receivers, but you've got this year before you have to pay London, and then I think the following year before Olave and Puka. I'm sorry, Puka's got to get paid this year because he's not a first-round pick. So the year of having 3 very cheap receivers who can do this is potentially fading away.
Yeah, it's going to be 3 very expensive receivers come next year. But yeah, some glaring holes. Obviously, running back is kind of up for grabs on his team. Tight end, D tackle is pretty settled between those two, in my opinion. They're consistent point producers. D end, again, some underperformers that were high picks. Linebacker looks okay, but a number of holes here. And what picks do they have? You got a number of picks, so they have quite a few picks to fill those holes. But if I were them, they're obviously receiver heavy. I would start breaking out those receivers and see what you can get to fill some of the other holes. You're not forced to use draft picks to fill those holes, because in my opinion, unless you have 101, 102, 103, you're always drafting best available.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be the challenge here is using those picks to move around, but also being where I want to be to start with, because there's obviously the ability to use those picks to move around, because as the first 15 picks always like to remind us, I'm going to give this a minute to see if I get an offer. Everyone's trying to move their pick during draft day. But not everyone's able to do it. So having the ammo to be able to do deals as they come up is pretty important. All right. Bears and Packers. Packers really haven't done a whole lot this offseason, so I'm not going to say much about them. But Bears, a lot of time invested and a lot of improvement made on this roster.
Yeah, this is a pretty decent team now.
Okay, I guess I'll talk about it. Team that was famous for having 2 very expensive quarterbacks now has J.J. McCarthy, who is stepping into the starter role in Minnesota. So looking good there. As mentioned, Najee signed with the Chargers. He's a good tentpole at the running back position to kind of continue to build around. Addison, Marvin Harrison, Trey Palmer, Andre Iosivas, and others. A very impressive growing receiving core. And then the defense, I feel like, has seen some improvement for sure. And I think Bears has said they're seeing that back end of the first round to target some defensive improvements as well. So he's moved some of those picks to target some of these players we just talked about. But again, it's good to see the Bears moving towards respectability again.
Yeah, very much. I would actually say he's one of the few teams that doesn't have an issue in their secondary. He has some pretty decent safeties. He has some decent corners.
Yeah.
Definitely needs another defensive end, but not too many critiques for this team. Defensive end, defensive tackle, tight end. It's probably about it. Maybe some depth at running back.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I continue to call it the Chargers tier, but I feel like that's accurate. It's probably not a playoff team. It's definitely better than a pure tanker team. They've already sold their first to get a certain value out of it, and very likely the range they're falling in is going to be at least of that value.
You don't think the Bears can compete in this division?
I think, again, there's a lot of questions. I'd say if I had to handicap it, I'd say there's probably a 15% chance they win the division.
Okay.
And again, because I have a view of what I want to do with my team, I'd say that puts them in kind of the 4th place position. But I got a lot of shit I got to do before I can really, truly feel confident about jumping. people in this process right now.
Yeah, 'cause, like, I don't know. I look at it. I think he's better than Lyons. I think he's slightly worse than Packers, and we have to see what you do. But as of right now, I think he's a more put together team than yours.
Yeah, I'd say that's absolutely fair.
So, for the time being, I think the Bears are probably a very close second in that division to Packers. If if you want to put Packers at number one.
I mean, that's probably where they belong right now. But I think you made the agreed point that they're by no means unreachable. All right, should we move over to the trades?
Sure.
We had an emergency podcast, and we still made 17 trades since Thursday. That's fantastic. So, look, I know I kind of host the podcast, but I don't do this to talk about my trades. So I have a lot of these. I'll kind of mention what happens in them. If you guys want to go through it, then I'm perfectly fine with that. If you just want to keep moving, we can do that. But shortly after we finished the pod on Thursday, I took an offer from the Pats, Zay Flowers, Jordan Hicks, 208, 309, 317, 401, and 404 for Kwity Paye, DeMario Overshown, Trenton Simpson, and the 114.
Yeah.
Pats wasn't done, swapping likely to the Commanders for the 124. Sorry, what were you saying, Commanders?
No, I don't. I like the trade for both of you. The Zay Flowers trade. I think it's pretty spot on value.
All right.
Yeah, I think it's pretty even. I think the Zay Flowers is severely undervalued in this league with the number of times he's been moved this offseason. but overall, I think it's a pretty fair trade.
Yeah, and look, we had a good conversation in chat yesterday about what some of these players were picked and what I paid for some of those players and turn those things over for, and what I wanted to focus on. And it was an overwhelming margin that felt like, for example, Garrett Wilson, Zay Flowers is at their contract more attractive than the one-on-one. And look, that's fantastic. I'm glad people feel that way. I will say, and again, there's a quote that I've stolen from the Player Profiler team. There's only 2 times in the NFL when teams are not allowed to lie to you. It's free agency and it's the draft, when they actually have to put their money where their mouth is. And I will say, it's real easy to click an answer in a poll. But when I was offering those players to about half the league, there wasn't that level of interest in them. So, sorry, guys, but I'm afraid that some of you are completely full of shit. Anyways, speaking of Zay Flowers,
one of those people, but
speaking of Zay Flowers, add him to Tank Bixby and Chauncey Golston for Trayvon Walker and 113. Again, this is part of the breakup of the pieces that I moved for the 101 later. So, look, I like Flowers. I agree. I think he's probably underrated, but I don't know what the hell's happening in Baltimore. Zay looks like he's number one. Bateman performed quite well last year. Andrews had a colossal just breakdown, and then likely is emerging. And there's rumor that they want to add another guy to that group. So you add a top 50 receiver to that, and what happens to everybody? So again, I know that's a big if, and frankly, an if that a lot of teams are having to deal with right now. But it was really tough to get value like even this for Zay. I think I kind of had him pretty well in line with the 113.
Yeah, all of those lovely pre-draft smoke screens where you can never can never believe anything that you read as far as news that comes out or leaks, because half of it's bullshit, if not more than half.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see. Continuing on. So in almost the same breath, had countered an offer for Garrett Wilson that Saints accepted. Garrett for the 110 and the 209. I don't know if I hit it at this point. I acquire it later, but I have the 208 and the 210. And I think it's a well-known fact in this league. I like my runs when I can get them of 2 or 3 straight picks. So the combination there also met the value I was trying to trade Garrett for. So just worked out. And then broke down Trayvon Walker for Braylon Trice and the 127. Braylon, of course, was injured all last year, but before that was 2-time team MVP for the Huskies when they were in the thick of the national championship hunt. So, I don't know, fan of his. So, happy to make that trade. Cowboys continue to break things down. Kayvon Thibodeau and Mo Cox for Austin Booker, Flavion Chason, and the 124. So same kind of idea. 127 and some younger pieces for a much stronger defensive end. In this case, it's Thibodeau instead of Trayvon Walker.
Yeah, I think that was a steal for the Cowboys. I didn't like that for the Patriots much at all. Thibodeau is a decent player, but worth Chason plus a late first, where you can essentially get the same caliber level player right there. I think that was an overpay.
Yep, that's fair. Again, I had a couple of late-looking 2026 firsts. Was able to move the Commanders 26 first for Braylon Allen and Rashad Bateman. Bateman, I turned around and flipped for Roquan Smith by trading Drew Sanders with him. And then, as mentioned, we had the mythical, fabled trade of the Green Bay Packers, giving up Andy Dalton that he won in free agency for the 509. I think this changes the division. What do you guys think?
Definitely moves him into contender.
I don't know how
I was
much
just
he bought.
shocked to see that name pop up. That's it. I got excited for all of about 1/10 of a second until I saw what it was.
Well, again, Chargers have Bryce Young, so getting Dalton makes a lot of sense for him. The Bryce is right. Then Cowboys breaking down Greenlaw for Eric Wilson and the Rams second. Wilson's a rotational linebacker, right?
Yes, yeah, I think he's starting to get up there in age, so he's going to be even more rotational than he has been. But yeah, he's not going to have a significant impact. But I mean that second for Dre Greenlaw. Dre has had injuries galore. When he is healthy, he's very productive. So it's more of just can he stay healthy and what does he produce if he does?
Yep. And again, Dre's coming off an injury, so I get that he's probably you can't get the full dollar. You got to settle for 80 or 85 cents on him. But
oh wow, I'm just looking at the contract that Dre signed. It was 3 years for $31 million. So obviously the Broncos are going to be getting their fair use out of him. So I would venture to say if you're investing that much money into him, I would expect big things.
Well, again, the interesting thing is apparently the 49ers offered him a bigger payday, but a shorter term. And he wanted the 3-year contract. So that tells me some things about where he feels his health is as well.
True.
Bucks and Raiders, Tajay Spears, Greg Dortch, Evan Ingram, and Jacoby Durant for Charbonnet, Jerrion Jones, Chuck Clark, and the 204. I had the same response to the second's on the wrong side.
Yes, agreed. Yeah. Unless you're expecting Evan Ingram to blow up the world with what he does in Denver, I would say that was not enough for Charbonnet.
Yep.
Especially with Walker not being able to stay healthy.
Yeah, that was I don't know, a questionable move, definitely.
But on the flip side, if Walker does stay healthy, how much use do we actually see with Charbonnet with a new it's a new offensive coordinator, I believe, this year. So who knows?
Yeah,
we could look back at this and be completely on the other side at the end of the season. So,
yep. Speaking of questionable moves, definitely a lot of debate about, of course, mine here. I got the 101 from the Cardinals for 110, 113, and the Bengals 26 first. Look, I've been on record that I think if you take Genty out of this class, it reminds me of some recent draft classes and a lot of really good running back prospects. But Genty is like one of those that is truly a generational guy. And that's how I feel about him. And I clearly gave that value to trade up the 101 to go get him. So, look, the first pick is Genty. It's going to take a Jaden Daniels level offer to get me off of the 101. And that's who's going to be going. So unless you're willing to kind of come like that, I'd suggest giving Saints a call and seeing what 102 is worth.
Yeah, I would agree with you. You take Genty out of this class, and that's a massive overpay or massive overreach for the likes of Cam Ward or whoever you put it in that at 101 if Genty's not there. But with him being there, I'd say it's good value for Cardinals. Obviously, helps him build up his team quite a bit. And if Genty hits, it's great value for you too, because we've seen what he can do in college. So.
Then let's see. I go to Buccaneers and Jatavian and some defensive depth getting shipped off at 204. I won't mention the other players really because those are guys he was trying to give away for free 40 hours beforehand. So for me to pretend that, look how good these guys are would be frankly disingenuous. Then Commanders coming up the top rope saying, I can do bad too. Picking up DK Metcalf and John Stevens for Xavier Legette, Brian Cook, the 125, and a future third. Look, let's just call this what it is. It's Legette and the 25 for Metcalf. It's a great win-win. You're trying to consolidate around a certain number of players, Commanders, and it's a great consolidation move for a team like Raiders who's trying to stay relevant and pick up some assets. It's exactly what he's trying to do.
Yeah, I was very hopeful for Legette going into last year. Obviously, the QB situation is fluid over there. Some people have said that Bryce Young is finally fitting into his role, but you can see that change at the drop of a hat. I don't think he's quite as solidified as people want to say. And looking at his metrics, I'm a finance guy. I look at numbers, and Legette's separation numbers were some of the worst in the league for wide receivers. So I was not as high as I was going into the season. So pairing that with a first, I was trying to get up to a more notable asset with question marks of his own. Going to a new team with who's the quarterback going to be. But obviously it's DK Metcalf nonetheless.
All right, why don't you guys finish off the top three here? I got to use the head real fast, but I'll chime in as I go.
All right. 114, Patriots trade away to Vikings for Roquan Smith and 204. I think that's quite a generous pay for Roquan.
Yeah,
204.
I would agree. I liked the 114 side better. Roquan is a great player, but he's starting to get up there in age. I believe he's 28 now, and he's sitting around the $20 million mark, which is expensive to say the least. And obviously, Patriots, I believe they have quite a number of holes that they could use that 114 to fill. That they still have the 204 to fill with, but the caliber of players lost there. That division, though, that that Patriots is in, it's not the most competitive division, so I can see him wanting to add pieces to put him over the hill. Just maybe not the piece that I would have targeted.
Yeah, he's already won that division, right?
Yeah, it's a sad state of affairs.
Yeah. Oh no, Jets is in that division.
So then we've got the running back trade from this morning. I picked up Roschon in the previous deal and wanted to complete the current Bears backfield with Swift. So I moved down from 119 with Kendrick Bourne to get Swift in 130. So say what you will, and there are rumors that they are going to add a running back to that backfield, which would suck. But if they don't, I think with Swift and Roschon, with Ben Johnson being there, I've got a nice little 1-2 punch to complement everything else I have going on. But definitely taking a risk there for sure.
I think at the end of the day, you'll end up having Jonty and Swift both in the same backfield, so you'll have the full complement. But yeah, I definitely see them adding someone there, whether it's Jonty's caliber or not. Swift, he'll be productive for this year only. I would guess, but he'll put up respectable figures. If I had to throw a figure out there. But my inkling is Jonty's going to join him.
Yeah, I don't know if he's going to make it there. I truly think he's going to be a Vegas Raider, especially with Pete Carroll there. We shall see. Seahawks and Buccaneers, David Bell, Debo, and 226 for Cleveland Farrell, Trey Hendrickson, and Pinnock. This is just, look, to me, it's highway robbery for Trey Hendrickson. Yes, he's 30 years old. Yes, he's a defensive asset. I get it. He's also on league minimum. And if you do the points per dollar calculation that some teams build themselves off of, Trey Hendrickson's a goddamn unicorn. So
he is. I think Buccaneers are probably more worried about his contract situation that's going on in real life, and how that's going to be resolved. But even still, I think he moved him at the wrong time. He should have sat it out before moving Trey.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the thing. Trey requested a trade. The Bengals said they're not going to trade him, and they've come back and said they feel good about the offer they sent them. This is the stupid song and dance you see either right before he gets moved during the draft, or they come back and you see during the draft it gets announced he's signed a 3-year, $80 million extension.
Yep. Yeah, I think it was just riding the coattails of the uncertainty with Trey. I think Bucks would have been better suited to wait out the news to see what happens because, like you said, the league minimum contract for Hendrickson is absolutely fucking ridiculous. So,
yeah, it's one of those few in the league still that it's kind of like it was what Eckler was a few years ago. It's what Geno Smith kind of is. We don't have a whole lot of those contracts left, just because for obvious reasons they age out, extend out, perform out, all of those things. But this is one of those last ones where it's like, really, you're getting that level of production for that level of contract. So, good for Seahawks, adding yet another good rotational piece to their cadre of excellence. But, and maybe I'm too low on Debo. I know he just got traded from the Niners, and people may say I'm a homer and therefore can't be objective about this, but look, I know what he is, and I know what he was performing at last year. So
It's also a
let's not
$18 million Debo, nonetheless.
Yeah. So you're also saving a buttload of money.
Yeah.
All right, hour and 35 minutes. That's what we got to target for when we do the AFC next week, so they don't feel, gypped or anything like that. But I think appreciate you both jumping on and going through the NFC in such depth. We'll do the AFC next week, and then we'll do hot takes and season predictions before the draft, and then we're almost there. We're almost to draft season, so we'll see how many more times I turn my team over between now and then. But only time will tell. I think I'm solidly in the 30 trades so far this season, so I like how I'm starting. Maybe I'll get to 50 by the time we get to the draft, but that requires trade partners, and that requires interest, and that requires activity. So appreciate those who are contributing to that, and appreciate those who listen. And like I said, we'll be back next week to talk about the AFC. So good luck and